This didn't happen slowly. It detonated. Old videos resurfacing, audio clips circulating, and the most chilling signal? Diddy sold his matte black private jet, the same jet he paraded as proof of untouchable power. Now it's gone, and insiders whisper the same thing. This is liquidation. For years, people said nothing could touch him. Too rich, too connected, too protected. But now, federal raids, mounting civil lawsuits, assets quietly disappearing. And suddenly, the internet isn't asking if something is wrong. It's asking how long has this been hidden? Because what we're witnessing isn't just another celebrity scandal. This is an alleged empire built on power and silence, finally cracking. And the more evidence that surfaces, the more people realize we might have been watching the warning signs for decades and chose to look away. Until now. Let me break this down for you. Videos people hadn't seen in decades are flooding timelines. Party clips that feel off. Karaoke moments that make viewers pause. Audio leaks no one expected to hear again. Individually, easy to dismiss. Together, they feel like breadcrumbs leading somewhere darker. And here's where it gets crazy. Fans online turned into full-blown investigators. They're not just watching these clips, they're dissecting them frame by frame, slowing down footage, zooming into background details, comparing locations to known properties, matching timestamps to legal filings. And what they're finding is chilling. One clip shows a lavish party from the early 2000s. At first glance, standard celebrity flex. But viewers noticed something. In the background, someone appears visibly uncomfortable. Their body language screams distress. And when people cross-referenced that footage with recent lawsuit descriptions, the details matched, down to the room layout, down to the people present. Another video resurfaced from a 2009 award show after-party. Diddy's on a microphone, laughing, saying, "We decide what's hot. We control everything." Back then, it sounded like industry bravado, confidence, power. But now, knowing what we know about the allegations, about the alleged control mechanisms, about the reported NDAs and payoffs, that statement hits completely different. It doesn't sound like confidence anymore. It sounds disturbingly close to a confession of manipulation. Then there's the audio. Snippets allegedly recorded at private gatherings. Nothing definitively incriminating on its own, but the conversations, the tone, the way certain names are mentioned, it all feels like pieces of a puzzle that's finally being assembled. And legal experts say that's exactly how federal cases are built, not with one smoking gun, but with a pattern, a mosaic of evidence that individually seems circumstantial, but together it paints a damning picture. TMZ dropped prison footage last week. Diddy appears smiling, relaxed, unbothered, and viewers immediately asked, why does he look comfortable? Who's filming this? What does he know that we don't? Because for someone facing the most serious allegations of their life, that demeanor feels calculated, like someone who still believes they hold cards the public doesn't know about yet. But here's what shook people the most. It's not just old footage resurfacing randomly. The timing feels coordinated. Videos dropping days before court hearings. Audio clips leaked hours after legal motions are filed. And that's when folks online started asking a different question. Is someone orchestrating this release? Is this a strategic media campaign? Or is this evidence being weaponized? Because if you're trying to pressure someone, if you're building public sentiment before a trial, this is exactly how you do it. Slow drip, strategic timing, maximum impact. And the alleged tapes, that's where everything gets darker. According to multiple lawsuits and former associates, explicit recordings allegedly exist, recordings that reportedly involve multiple high-profile individuals. And here's the part that froze the internet. A lawyer representing an alleged victim claims these videos are being shopped privately, not released publicly. Shopped, meaning someone is allegedly offering subjects the chance to buy them back before they go public. Let that sink in. That's not gossip. That's alleged blackmail mechanics. That's an entire shadow system of control and silence. And if that's true, if explicit material was used to maintain power and influence for years, then this isn't just about one man's downfall. This is about an entire infrastructure of exploitation potentially being exposed. Folks online are comparing timelines, cross-referencing names mentioned in lawsuits with people who appear in resurfaced footage, and the connections are unsettling because it's not just random party attendees, it's producers, label executives, people who allegedly had the power to make or break careers. And suddenly, the question isn't just what happened, it's who knew and who helped cover it up. Everything traces back to March 2024. Federal agents raided properties in Los Angeles and Miami simultaneously. That moment reportedly triggered panic at the highest levels, not just for Diddy, but for everyone allegedly connected to the operation. Because if the most serious charges ever stuck, if prosecutors built a case strong enough to survive motions to dismiss, then, according to legal insiders, asset seizure was absolutely on the table. Homes, cars, companies, bank accounts, everything. And that's when one move suddenly looks very different. Selling the jet wasn't flexing down. It wasn't downsizing for humility. It was survival mode. Because if assets are about to be frozen, if the government is preparing to seize property connected to alleged criminal activity, then moving assets becomes priority number one. And that jet? It wasn't just transportation. It was a symbol, a $60 million symbol of untouchable power. And the fact that it's gone, quietly sold without the usual fanfare, that tells you everything about the shift happening behind closed doors. Let's talk about the financial picture. At his peak, Diddy was reportedly worth over $1 billion. Bad Boy Records, Sean John clothing line, Ciroc vodka partnership, Revolt TV. The man built an empire, multiple revenue streams, diversified investments. He wasn't just a rapper or producer. He was a mogul, someone who understood how to leverage fame into long-term wealth. And for decades, that empire seemed bulletproof. But cracks started showing years ago. Bad Boy Records hasn't had a major hit in over a decade. Sean John filed for bankruptcy in 2016, and he lost ownership. Revolt TV struggled with profitability and relevance. The Ciroc partnership, while still lucrative, faced declining vodka sales industry-wide. So financially, the foundation was already weakening. Not collapsing, but definitely not as solid as the public image suggested. Then came the lawsuits. Not just one or two, a wave. Civil cases alleging assault, abuse, coercion, and exploitation spanning decades. And civil cases are expensive. Even if you win, the legal fees are astronomical. Discovery demands, depositions, expert witnesses, media management. That burns through cash fast. And when multiple cases are filed simultaneously, when you're fighting on multiple fronts, the financial drain is exponential. But here's what people don't realize. Civil cases aren't just about money, they're about exposure. Because in civil discovery, plaintiffs can subpoena documents, financial records, communications, travel logs, anything potentially relevant to the case. And if you're someone who allegedly operated through NDAs, payoffs, and controlled silence, civil discovery is your worst nightmare because it forces transparency, it pulls back the curtain, and once that information is in legal filings, it becomes public record. That's why some legal experts believe the civil cases might be more dangerous than potential criminal charges, because criminal cases require proof beyond reasonable doubt. That's a high bar. But civil cases only require a preponderance of evidence, basically more likely than not. That's a much lower standard. And if a civil case succeeds, if a jury finds liability, that creates legal precedent that strengthens every other case. It becomes a domino effect. Now, let's talk about the alleged power structure. According to multiple lawsuits and former associates, the operation wasn't just one person. It was a network. Assistants who allegedly facilitated logistics, security personnel who allegedly enforced silence, producers who allegedly looked the other way, label executives who allegedly protected the brand at all costs. And that network, it only works when everyone believes the center holds, when everyone trusts that the power structure is untouchable. But the moment federal agents raid your properties, the moment your name is in headlines for allegations this serious, that trust evaporates. People start protecting themselves. NDAs get tested. loyalty gets reassessed, and suddenly the people who once helped maintain the system start becoming cooperating witnesses. Because when the ship is sinking, everyone grabs a lifeboat. And here's the motive piece that connects everything. If you built an empire on control, if your entire power structure depended on fear and silence, then the moment that control slips, everything unravels fast. The alleged tapes being shopped, that's leverage disappearing. The old videos resurfacing, that's narrative control evaporating. The jet being sold, that's financial flexibility vanishing. And when all three happen simultaneously, you're not just facing allegations, you're facing total systemic collapse. Think about it. For decades, the alleged strategy was silence through settlements, control through NDAs, power through industry influence. But that only works in the shadows. The moment everything is dragged into public court filings, the moment federal investigators are involved, the moment the internet becomes a crowdsource investigation machine, the old playbook stops working. And if you don't have a new strategy, if you can't adapt to transparency, then you're not just losing battles, you're losing the war. And that's exactly what we're watching. Not just one man's legal troubles, but an entire alleged system of power and control collapsing in real time. Because the infrastructure that protected this for years, the industry silence, the media complicity, the financial leverage, it's all crumbling. And once that happens, there's no rebuilding it. The empire doesn't recover, it just ends. But here's the part that really hits different, the voices that won't stay quiet anymore. Because this isn't just about legal filings and asset sales. This is about real people, real trauma, real lives shattered by alleged abuse of power. Aubrey O'Day, former Danity Kane member and someone who worked directly under Diddy for years, dropped a statement that froze the internet. This isn't even 1% of the justice victims deserve. Not closure, not accountability. 1%. Let that sink in. She's saying even if every allegation is proven, even if every lawsuit succeeds, it still doesn't come close to addressing the full scope of harm allegedly caused. And that statement did something powerful. It shifted the conversation. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about one man's downfall. It was about an entire generation of artists, assistants, and associates who allegedly suffered in silence. People who signed NDAs, people who took settlements, people who were told their careers would be destroyed if they spoke up. And for years, they stayed quiet, not because the allegations weren't true, but because the cost of speaking was too high. But now, the dam is breaking. More people are coming forward. Not for fame, not for money, but because they finally see a path to being believed. Because when federal agents raid properties, when civil lawsuits start succeeding, when the industry can no longer pretend nothing happened, suddenly speaking up doesn't feel like career suicide anymore. It feels like survival, like reclaiming a voice that was stolen. And the emotional weight of these stories is devastating. One lawsuit describes an alleged victim being coerced at a party. Another details alleged abuse spanning years. Another claims witnessing illegal activity and being threatened into silence. These aren't vague accusations. These are detailed, specific, traumatic accounts. And the consistency across multiple independent sources, that's what makes them so hard to dismiss. But here's what breaks people's hearts. The alleged victims aren't just adults who worked in the industry. Some were reportedly young, aspiring artists who looked up to this figure, people who trusted that fame and mentorship were the goals, and instead they allegedly encountered manipulation, exploitation, and abuse. That's not a scandal. That's a betrayal of the most fundamental kind. And for every person who's filed a lawsuit, for every name we know, there are likely dozens more who haven't come forward. People who are still bound by NDAs, people who are still afraid, people who are watching this unfold and deciding whether they're ready to relive their trauma publicly, because that's what speaking up requires. You don't just tell your story once, you tell it to lawyers, to journalists, to the public, and then you watch as people dissect it, question it, and debate whether you're telling the truth. That's exhausting. That's re-traumatizing. And the fact that people are still doing it anyway, that tells you how urgent this moment feels. Because this isn't just about revenge. This is about breaking a cycle. This is about making sure the next generation of artists doesn't have to choose between their dreams and their safety. And that's why the emotional layer of this story matters just as much as the legal one. Because, at the end of the day, systems of power don't crumble because of lawsuits. They crumble because victims find their voices. They crumble because the public finally says, no more, not on our watch, not in our industry. And that shift, that collective refusal to look away, that's what changes everything. Now let's get into the alleged tapes, because this is where the story gets darker than most people realize. A lawsuit filed by producer Rodney Jones reportedly references explicit audio recordings, and not just random recordings. Allegedly, these tapes involve high-profile individuals, a Philadelphia rapper whose identity was redacted in legal filings, but instantly guessed by anyone following hip-hop. And the details in the lawsuit, they're not vague, they're specific. Locations, dates, alleged participants, the kind of specificity that legal experts say is either completely fabricated or disturbingly accurate. And here's what shook people. It's not that proof exists, it's that the claims are detailed enough to be verified or debunked. That means discovery. That means subpoenas. That means if these tapes actually exist, they could be entered as evidence. And if they don't exist, then someone just committed perjury in federal court. Either way, this isn't going away quietly. But it gets even more disturbing. A lawyer representing an alleged victim claims explicit videos are being shopped privately, not leaked to the press, not handed to prosecutors, shopped, meaning someone allegedly has these recordings and is offering subjects the chance to pay to keep them private. That's not exposure, that's extortion. That's using alleged evidence of abuse as financial leverage. And if that's true, if explicit material is being leveraged for money, then this isn't just about one abuser. This is about a whole ecosystem of exploitation. Because someone recorded this material, someone stored it, someone now controls it, and someone decided the best use was financial leverage. That chain of custody, that decision-making process, it reveals a system that treated abuse as currency, as power, as something to be archived and weaponized. Let's talk about what online investigators found, because folks aren't just watching these videos, they're analyzing them like forensic experts. One user overlaid audio from an alleged leaked recording with publicly available footage from a 2008 party. The background noise matched, the voices in the distance matched, a timeline matched. And that kind of cross-referencing, that's building a circumstantial case that's harder to dismiss than any single piece of evidence. Another investigator traced the metadata from leaked screenshots. They identified the device used to capture the images. They matched the timestamp to known events. They even geolocated the photo based on background architecture. And all of that information, it's being compiled into public threads. Not by journalists, not by lawyers, but regular people who are refusing to let this story get buried.
And here's why that matters. In the past, powerful people could rely on media gatekeepers. If a story didn't get picked up by major outlets, it didn't exist. But now, the internet is the outlet. TikTok videos breaking down allegations get millions of views. Twitter threads compiling evidence trend for days. YouTube commentary channels reach audiences bigger than cable news. The gatekeepers are gone. and that means narrative control is gone too. But let's be real, not all of this is credible. Some videos are misidentified, some audio clips are taken out of context, some evidence is straight up fabricated by clout chasers looking for engagement. And that's the danger of crowdsourced investigations. Because when everything is treated as potentially damning, when every clip is analyzed for hidden meaning, the line between evidence and conspiracy gets blurred. That's why legal proceedings matter, because courts have rules. Evidence has to be authenticated. Witnesses have to testify under oath. Chain of custody has to be established. And while that process is slower and less dramatic than internet sleuthing, it's also more reliable. So when we talk about alleged tapes, we have to remember that until they're entered into evidence and verified, they're still just allegations. Serious allegations, detailed allegations, but allegations nonetheless. Still, the pattern is undeniable. Multiple lawsuits referencing recordings, multiple sources claiming tapes exist, multiple alleged victims describing being recorded without consent, and that consistency, even without the tapes being public, that builds a narrative that's hard to ignore. Because if even a fraction of these claims are true, if explicit recordings were made and used to maintain control, then we're not talking about misconduct, we're talking about systematic abuse. We're talking about calculated exploitation. We're talking about an alleged operation that treated human beings as leverage. And the fact that some of these recordings are allegedly being shopped instead of immediately handed to prosecutors, that tells you something too. It tells you that not everyone involved in this story is seeking justice. Some are seeking profit. Some are seeking revenge. Some are seeking their own version of power. And that complicates everything. Because the moment evidence becomes a commodity, the moment alleged abuse is treated as something to be bought and sold, the path to actual accountability gets murky. But here's what's not murky. The voices of alleged victims are getting louder. The legal filings are piling up. The federal investigation is ongoing, and whether or not the alleged tapes ever become public, whether or not every detail is proven, the damage is done. Because the empire built on silence and control, it's already crumbling. And no amount of money, no number of NDAs, no powerful connections can rebuild what's been lost. Trust, reputation, legacy. Once those are gone, they're gone forever. Now let's talk about the side stories that make this even crazier, because while the main allegations dominate headlines, there are smaller details that paint a fuller picture of how deep this goes. First, the prison footage. TMZ released video of Diddy inside a detention facility, and the internet's reaction was immediate. Why does he look so comfortable? He is smiling, laughing with other inmates, walking around like he's at a resort, not facing potentially life-altering charges. And people started asking questions. Who filmed this? How did TMZ get it? Is this leaked footage, or was this intentionally released to shape public perception? Because that's the thing about media strategy. Every image, every clip, every statement, it's all calculated. And if you're trying to show the public that you're unbothered, that you're still in control, that you're not worried because you know something they don't, then leaking footage of yourself looking relaxed in prison is exactly how you do it. But it backfired, because instead of looking powerful, it made people suspicious. It made them ask, what kind of strings are being pulled behind the scenes? Then there's the staff situation. Reports started circulating that employees at various Diddy-owned properties haven't been paid in months. Assistants, security, housekeeping, people who relied on steady paychecks suddenly left in limbo. And that's a huge red flag, because when someone with alleged billions stops paying staff, it's not about cash flow, it's about priorities. It's about legal fees eating up everything. It's about assets being moved or frozen. It's about a financial infrastructure collapsing faster than the public realizes. and former employees started speaking out, not with lawsuits, just with stories. Anonymous posts on industry forums, blind items to gossip sites, accounts of bizarre behavior, intense control, and environments that felt unsafe. And while none of this is courtroom evidence, it adds to the pattern. It paints a picture of someone whose private behavior was allegedly very different from their public persona. Let's also talk about the industry response, or rather the lack of it, because here's the wild thing. Most major artists haven't said a word. No statements of support, no condemnations, just silence. And that silence is deafening, because in an industry that's usually quick to pick sides, that loves public solidarity, the fact that almost no one is defending him, that tells you everything. It tells you that people know. They've always known. And now that the allegations are public, they're not willing to risk their own reputation by association. But there are whispers, private conversations among industry insiders, people allegedly saying, "I'm not surprised," people claiming they witnessed questionable behavior years ago but didn't speak up, people now wondering if their silence made them complicit. And that internal reckoning, that's happening across the industry right now. Not publicly, but in private group chats, in therapy sessions, in quiet moments of reflection where people are asking themselves, what did I know and what did I choose to ignore? Then there's the celebrity footage that keeps resurfacing. Old award show clips, radio interviews, reality show moments, and people are watching them with fresh eyes, looking for clues, analyzing body language, listening to offhand comments that might have been warnings. And while most of it is probably coincidental, some moments hit different now, like a 2004 MTV interview where an artist jokes about escaping a party early. Everyone laughed then, but knowing what we know now, was that actually a joke or was it a veiled cry for help that no one took seriously? And here's the uncomfortable truth. A lot of people probably did see warning signs. Industry veterans who noticed patterns, young artists who felt uncomfortable but didn't have the language or power to name it, journalists who heard rumors but couldn't verify them, and they all made choices to stay quiet, to protect their access, to avoid making waves. And now, with everything coming to light, those choices are haunting people. Because that's the real story underneath all of this. It's not just about one person's alleged crimes. It's about an entire industry that allegedly enabled, ignored, and profited from abuse for decades. It's about systems that prioritized profit over people. It's about power structures that protected predators and silenced victims. And until that system is dismantled, until the industry fundamentally changes how it operates, this won't be the last time we have this conversation. The names will change, but the pattern will repeat. So let's zoom out, because this story is bigger than one person. What we're witnessing is a cultural rappening, a moment where the public is finally asking the questions that should have been asked decades ago. A viral creator recently asked, "Are we still supporting artists accused of harming Black women?" And that question hit different. Because it's not just about believing victims, it's about who gets protected when allegations surface. It's about which victims get media attention and which ones get ignored. It's about the intersection of power, race, gender, and industry dynamics. And historically, Black women have been the least likely to be believed, the least likely to get justice, the least likely to have their trauma centered in these conversations. And that's changing, slowly, but it's changing, because survivors are demanding space, they're demanding to be heard, and they're refusing to let industry politics silence them anymore. The fact that multiple Black women are at the center of these allegations, and that the public is actually listening, that's significant. It represents a shift in who we believe, who we center, and whose voices matter. Then there's the legal landscape. California's Justice for Survivors Act is now active, and what that means is cases that would have been dismissed due to statutes of limitations can now move forward. Decades-old allegations can be legally pursued, and that's terrifying for anyone who thought time would protect them, because the clock didn't just stop, it reset. And alleged abusers from the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, they're all potentially vulnerable now.
But it's not just individuals who should be worried. It's the enablers. Because the law allows for cases against people who facilitated, covered up, or profited from abuse. That means label executives, managers, publicists, anyone who allegedly helped maintain the system. And if victims start naming names, if lawsuits expand beyond the primary accused, this could take down entire networks of complicity. And that's why Hollywood is bracing for impact, because this isn't isolated. The music industry, film, television, tech, every entertainment sector has similar allegations waiting to surface. And the precedent being set right now, the fact that powerful people are actually facing consequences, that emboldens other victims. It creates momentum. It builds a movement. The broader question is, how do we rebuild? Because tearing down corrupt systems is necessary, but what comes next? How do we create an industry where abuse isn't tolerated, where power doesn't equal immunity, where victims are believed and supported? That requires structural change. It requires accountability mechanisms. It requires a complete cultural shift in how the industry operates. And honestly, we're not there yet. We're in the exposure phase, the reckoning phase. But the rebuilding, that's gonna take years, maybe decades. Because changing systems that have existed for generations, systems that have made powerful people incredibly wealthy, that doesn't happen overnight. It requires sustained pressure, continued visibility, and a refusal to let this moment fade into the background once the headlines die down. Because that's usually what happens. A scandal erupts, everyone pays attention, then the news cycle moves on, and the industry quietly returns to business as usual. But this time feels different. Maybe because the allegations are so severe. Maybe because the evidence is so compelling. Maybe because the cultural moment finally matches the severity of the crimes. Whatever the reason, there's a sense that this time, it can't just fade away. This time, something has to actually change. So where does this end? Because right now, we're watching a collapse in real time. Assets disappearing, staff allegedly unpaid, financial control reportedly handed to third-party management. From billionaire freedom to restricted access to his own money. That's not a temporary setback. That's systemic dismantling. And the speculation is running wild. Some people think this is just the beginning, that more names are coming, that this is the first domino in a much larger fallout. Others think this is being blown out of proportion, that the allegations will fall apart under scrutiny, that powerful people always survive these scandals. But here's what we know for sure. Federal investigations don't raid properties without significant evidence. Civil lawsuits don't pile up without credible claims. Assets don't get liquidated unless someone is preparing for financial catastrophe. And industry silence doesn't happen unless people are trying to distance themselves from radioactive fallout. So even if some allegations don't hold up, even if some details are exaggerated, the core reality remains. An empire is crumbling. A power structure that seemed untouchable is being exposed, and the ripple effects are going to be felt for years. The real question isn't whether he survives this, it's whether the industry learns from it. Because if this just becomes another cautionary tale that people reference but don't act on, if the systems that enabled this remain intact, then nothing actually changes. We'll just be having this same conversation with different names in 5 years. But if this becomes a turning point, if this forces real accountability, if this leads to structural reforms in how the industry operates, then maybe something good comes from all this. Maybe the alleged victims finally get justice. Maybe the next generation of artists gets to pursue their dreams without sacrificing their safety. Maybe the industry becomes a place where talent matters more than who you're willing to submit to. That's the hope anyway. But hope isn't enough. It requires action. It requires continued pressure. It requires refusing to look away even when the story stops trending, because that's how systems actually change. Not through one explosive moment, but through sustained, relentless demand for something better. And right now, in this moment, the world is watching. The industry is bracing, and the alleged victims are finally being heard. Whatever happens next, it won't be business as usual. The empire built on silence and control, it's over. And what comes after, that's up to all of us. So here's the real question. Were we warned and chose not to listen? Because the signs were always there. The whispers, the rumors, the occasional brave voice that spoke up and was immediately silenced. We saw it, we heard it, and most of us looked the other way. Because it was easier, because it was uncomfortable, because calling out power felt impossible. But now that the tapes, the stories, and the laws are colliding, now that the system is finally tracking, who's next? Because this isn't isolated, this is a pattern, and patterns don't exist in a vacuum. They exist because systems allow them, because people enable them, because industries profit from them. And if we're serious about change, if we actually want to break these cycles, then we can't just focus on one name. We have to look at the entire infrastructure, the labels, the managers, the media, the fans, everyone who played a role in allowing this to continue for decades. Because accountability isn't just for the accused, it's for all of us who participated in the silence. So I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Which details shook you the most? The alleged tapes being shopped? The jet being sold? The pattern of silence finally breaking? And more importantly, do you believe this is the beginning or just the first crack? Because whatever this is, it's not over. More names are coming, more stories are surfacing, and the industry will never be the same. Make sure you like this video, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications because we're covering every twist, every development, every moment of this story as it unfolds. I appreciate you for rocking with me. Stay safe out there, stay critical, and remember, power that isn't checked eventually collapses under its own weight. We're watching it happen. The only question is, what do we build in its place?